I was very young when it happened. The kind of young where the world still felt safe simply because you didn't yet understand all the ways it wasn't. Back then, going to a big store felt like an adventure. The lights were brighter, the aisles seemed endless, and every shelf held something that could capture your attention for hours. My mom would take me along when she needed to shop, and like a lot of parents did in those days, she'd let me wander off to the toy section while she took care of the groceries or whatever else we needed. It wasn't considered dangerous then. It was normal. Kmart was my favorite. I can still picture it clearly, even now. The wide automatic doors that whooshed open as we walked in, the faint smell of popcorn and plastic, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The floors were polished but scuffed in places, reflecting the endless movement of carts and feet. Everything felt big when you were that small. The ceilings seemed higher, the aisles longer, the distance between me and my mom somehow both comforting and freeing. She would always crouch down to my level before letting me go. "Stay in the toy section," she'd say. "I'll come get you when I'm done." And I would nod, already distracted, my eyes drifting toward the rows of bright boxes behind her. That day was no different. I remember running ahead the moment she let go of my hand, weaving past carts and people until I reached the toy aisle. It was like stepping into another world. Rows of board games, dolls, action figures, puzzles, colors everywhere. Noise too, kids laughing, boxes being opened and closed, the occasional electronic beep from a display. I gravitated toward a game called Simon Says. It was set up on a low display table, the circular device with its colored buttons lighting up in patterns. Red, blue, green, yellow. It would flash a sequence and you had to repeat it. Simple, repetitive, hypnotic. I stood there completely absorbed, pressing the buttons, watching the lights, trying to beat the pattern. Time passed the way it does when you're a kid, unnoticed. I didn't hear footsteps approach. I didn't notice anyone watching. Not at first. It was only when a voice spoke that I realized I wasn't alone. "You're pretty good at that." I looked up. An old man stood beside me. At least, that's how I remember him. Old. Older than my grandparents, maybe. His face was lined, his hair thin and gray, his clothes plain in a way that didn't stand out. If you had asked me then to describe him, I probably wouldn't have been able to say much beyond that. He looked like anyone, like someone who belonged there. That's what made it easy. I didn't feel afraid. Not immediately. I smiled, a little shy but proud. "I'm trying to beat it." He chuckled softly, leaning slightly closer to watch. "You almost had it that time." I went back to the game, pressing the buttons, trying again. He stayed there, standing just close enough that I could feel his presence, but not so close that it felt strange. He made small talk, asking simple questions. What was my name? If I liked games? If I came here often? I answered without thinking. Because that's what kids do. Because nothing about it felt dangerous. Not yet. At some point, he reached out and pressed one of the buttons after I missed a sequence. "Like this," he said. I laughed a little, trying again, following the pattern. It felt normal, friendly, harmless. And that's how it starts. Gradually, the conversation shifted. "Are you here with your parents?" he asked. "My mom," I said, still focused on the game. "Where is she?" I gestured vaguely. "Shopping." He nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Do you want to see something else?" he asked after a moment. I looked up again. "What?" "There are more toys in the back," he said. "Better ones." I hesitated. Not because I was scared, just because I was comfortable where I was. "I like this one," I said. He smiled. That's the part I remember most clearly. Not the shape of his face, not his voice, but that smile. It wasn't wide or exaggerated. It wasn't obviously wrong, but something about it didn't feel quite right. At the time, I didn't understand why. I just felt it. "It'll just be for a minute," he said gently. "Come on." And then he did something small, Something simple. Something that changed everything. He reached out and took my hand. Not roughly, not forcefully, just like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like he had every right to. And I let him. Because I was a child. Because no one had ever told me not to. Because nothing about it seemed urgent or dangerous. We started walking. Out of the toy aisle. Into the main part of the store. I remember the sound of our footsteps on the floor. The hum of the lights. The distant murmur of people shopping. Everything felt normal. No one stopped us. No one looked twice. Why would they? It was just an old man and a child walking together. That's all anyone saw. We walked down the main center aisle, the widest one in the store. It led straight toward the back, toward a set of doors with a glowing exit sign above them. I remember seeing that sign even then, but it didn't mean anything to me. It was just another part of the store. He kept talking as we walked, his voice calm, steady, reassuring. I don't remember what he said. The words didn't stick. What stayed with me was the feeling of his hand around mine. Not tight, but firm, guiding. We passed row after row of shelves. Clothes, household items. Things I didn't care about. My attention drifted, my mind still half on the game I had left behind. And then, something shifted. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't loud. It was just a feeling. The same kind of feeling I had gotten earlier when he smiled. A quiet, creeping sense that something wasn't right. I slowed slightly. He didn't. His grip tightened just a little. Come on, he said. We reached the last row before the back of the store. And that's when I saw her. My mom. Standing at the end of the aisle to our right, looking at something on a shelf. Relief hit me instantly. Like a wave. I see my mom, I said. He stopped. Just for a second. I felt his hand tense around mine. Then he looked down at me. That smile again. But this time it looked different. Tighter. Forced. Oh, he said. I didn't wait. I pulled my hand away. Turned and ran. I didn't look back. I just ran straight to her, my heart pounding, my breath quick and uneven. I grabbed onto her, pressing into her side like I always did when I wanted comfort. She looked down at me, surprised. Hey, she said, where did you come from? The toys, I said quickly. She smiled, brushing my hair back. Did you have fun? I nodded. I didn't tell her. Not then. Not ever. Because in my mind, I had done something wrong. I had left the toy section. I had gone with a stranger. Even though I didn't fully understand it, I knew it wasn't something I was supposed to do. And I didn't want to get in trouble. So I stayed quiet. We finished shopping. We went home, and life went on. But something had changed. I didn't wander as far after that. I stayed closer. I didn't talk to strangers the same way. I didn't trust as easily. At the time, I couldn't explain why. I just knew something about that day felt off. It wasn't until years later that I understood. Really understood. I was older. Old enough to hear stories. To see news reports. To understand words like kidnapping and abuse and the things people were capable of. And one day the memory came back. Clearer than it had ever been. The toy aisle. The game. The man. His hand in mine. The way he led me toward the exit. And the way he stopped when I said I saw my mom. That's when it hit me. Hard. Cold. Final. If she hadn't been there and if I hadn't looked to the right at that exact moment, if I had taken just a few more steps, I might not have come back. Not to the toy aisle. Not to my mom. Not at all. The realization sat heavy in my chest. Something that couldn't be undone or forgotten. I had been that close. Closer than I ever knew. And the only thing that stopped it was chance. A glance to the right. a familiar face at the end of an aisle. I never saw him again, never heard about him. He disappeared the same way he appeared, quietly, without a trace. But sometimes, even now, I think about that moment, about how normal it all felt, how easy it was, how no one noticed, and how many other times it might have happened to someone else. Someone who didn't see their mom at the end of the aisle. Someone who didn't get the chance to pull their hand away. Because the scariest part isn't what happened. It's how easily it could have been worse. How close it came to being something else entirely. And how, at 8 years old, I walked right up to the edge of something I didn't even understand. And somehow, without knowing why, turned back. Story 2. It was one of those winters that didn't just settle over the land, but seemed to bury it. The kind that turned everything silent, heavy, and distant. In rural Quebec, far from the clustered lights of town, winter wasn't just a season, it was a presence. It pressed against the windows, crept into the walls, and swallowed sound until even your own breathing felt too loud. Our house stood alone, 2 miles from the nearest stretch of village lights, surrounded by open land and dark trees that disappeared into the night. In the daytime, it felt peaceful, isolated but calm. At night, especially in the winter, it felt like the edge of the world. That night in 1990, the cold was brutal. The kind that turned breath into smoke before it even left your lips. The kind that made wood creak and groan as it fought to hold together against the temperature. Snow had fallen earlier, thick and untouched, blanketing everything in a smooth, white silence. No cars passed, no voices carried. There was nothing but the house and whatever lay beyond it in the dark. Inside, I slept. 3 small children, unaware of anything beyond dreams. I was the youngest, barely a year old. My brothers were 3 and 6. We shared a room, bundled under heavy blankets, the warmth of the house holding the cold at bay. Our father slept down the hall. The house itself was simple. A small living room, a kitchen, a hallway that led to the bedrooms. Old wood floors that carried sound easily, especially at night. Every step, every shift echoed just enough to be heard. That's why what happened next should have woken us. But it didn't. The door opened sometime after midnight. Not quietly, not carefully. It didn't creak open like someone sneaking in. It pushed inward with force, the cold air rushing in with it, cutting through the warmth of the house like a blade. The sound alone should have been enough to stir anyone awake, but the house swallowed it. Or maybe we were just too deep in sleep to hear. He stepped inside. The man who entered our home did not belong there. Not in the way a stranger doesn't belong, but in a deeper, more unsettling sense. He carried something with him that disrupted the stillness of the house, something that felt wrong against the quiet. He didn't call out, didn't knock, didn't hesitate. He simply walked in. His boots left marks on the floor, dragging snow and something darker behind him. His movements were uneven, unsteady, like his body wasn't fully under his control. He staggered slightly as he moved further into the living room, his breath coming in harsh, visible bursts in the cold air that had followed him inside. And he spoke. At first it was just a murmur, low, broken words that didn't quite form sentences. But as he moved through the house, his voice grew louder. Je vais mourir, je vais mourir, over and over. I'm going to die. The words echoed in the stillness, soft at first, then louder, then strained, as if he was trying to convince himself of something he already knew. The floor creaked under his weight. The walls carried his voice. The house listened. And still, we did not wake. Our father did. At first, it was the sound that pulled him from sleep. Not the words, not the footsteps, but something deeper, an instinct, the sense that something in the house was wrong. He opened his eyes slowly, disoriented, listening. There it was again. A voice. Not his children. Not a dream. A voice in the house. Je vais mourir. His body went still. For a moment he didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened as the words repeated, closer now, clearer. Someone was inside. He got out of bed. The cold hit him immediately, seeping through the floor, creeping up through his legs as he stepped into the hallway. The house felt different now. Not just quiet, but occupied. He moved slowly at first, careful, listening for any sign of movement. The voice continued, broken, desperate. Je vais mourir. Je vais mourir. He reached the end of the hallway. The living room lay just beyond, and that's when he saw him. At first it didn't make sense. The shape of a man stood there, hunched slightly, swaying where he stood. His clothes were dark, heavy with snow and something else. His hands hung at his sides, stiff, fingers curled slightly as if frozen in place. But it was his face, or what should have been his face, that stopped everything. There wasn't one. Not in the way a face should be. Where there should have been features, eyes, nose, mouth, there was something else, something wrong. Something that didn't belong on a living person. His scalp had been torn, peeled forward, hanging down over his face like a grotesque mask. Frozen stiff in the cold, it obscured everything beneath it, giving the illusion of a blank, featureless void. For a split second, our father didn't see a man. He saw something else. Something inhuman. A figure standing in his home with no face, speaking in a broken voice about death. The kind of thing you don't understand. The kind of thing your mind refuses to process. Then the man moved. A small shift. A stumble. And reality snapped back into place. This wasn't something supernatural. This was a man. A man who had been in an accident. A man who was dying. Je vais mourir. The words came again, weaker this time. Our father stepped forward, slowly, his mind racing, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The smell hit him next, metallic, sharp, mixed with the cold air and something sour, like alcohol. The man swayed again, his body barely holding itself upright. "Hey," our father said, his voice steady despite everything. "Can you hear me?" No response. Just the same words. Je vais mourir. He moved closer, reaching out carefully, unsure of how the man would react. His skin was cold to the touch. Not just cold from the outside air, but deep, penetrating cold, the kind that settles into the body. Frozen, drunk, bleeding, and somehow still standing. "What happened?" our father asked louder now. The man's head tilted slightly, the frozen mass of his scalp shifting just enough to reveal a glimpse of what lay beneath. Blood, ice, skin torn and exposed. "Accident," the man mumbled, his voice barely audible. "Odo, mon ami." "Car accident. My friend." Our father understood. Somewhere out there in the darkness, on the empty stretch of road that led to our house, something had happened. Something violent enough to tear a man's scalp from his head and kill another instantly. And this man, this broken, frozen figure, had walked a mile in that condition, through the snow, through the cold, to reach the only house for miles. Je vais mourir. Our father didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat, his keys, moving quickly now, purpose replacing shock. "You're not going to die," he said firmly, more to himself than to the man. "Not tonight." Getting him to the car wasn't easy. The man could barely walk. His legs dragged, his body swayed, his weight uneven and unpredictable. Every step left marks in the snow, dark against the white, a trail that told a story of where he had come from. The car engine struggled against the cold, but eventually turned over. They drove. 25 kilometers to the nearest hospital. The road was empty, dark, silent. The man continued to mutter beside him, weaker now, his voice fading in and out. Je vais mourir. Our father kept talking to him, kept him awake, kept him present. You're going to be fine. You're almost there. Stay with me. The hospital lights appeared in the distance like something unreal. Bright, safe, warm. They pulled in fast. Doctors rushed out. Voices overlapped. Hands took over. And just like that, the man was gone. Not dead, but out of our father's hands. He survived. Somehow. Against everything that should have taken him. The cold had slowed the bleeding. The alcohol had dulled the pain. And the will to live had carried him through the dark. Back at the house, nothing had changed. The door still stood open. The cold still lingered. The marks on the floor remained. And in the bedroom down the hall, 3 children slept, unaware, undisturbed, as if none of it had happened. To this day, that's what stays with our father the most. Not the man, not the face, not the words, but the silence. The fact that through all of it, the door, the voice, the footsteps, the chaos, we never woke up. Because if we had stepped into that hallway, half asleep, confused, curious, we would have seen him, standing there, faceless, frozen, whispering that he was going to die. And that is something no child should ever see. Story 3. We picked that hill because it felt like ours. It wasn't really. Nothing out there ever truly belongs to anyone, but it had that reputation among the locals. A place just far enough into the woods to feel removed, but still close enough to reach on foot or by one of the narrow dirt trails that cut through the trees. If you knew the area, you knew the hill. People went there to camp, to drink, to get away for a night without going too far. One of the guys, Ryan, lived a few kilometers away. It was his idea. Perfect spot, he said earlier that evening as we followed him up the trail. No one bothers you out here. That sentence stuck with me later. No one bothers you out here. At the time, it sounded like a promise. It turned out to be something else entirely. The 4 of us reached the top just before it got fully dark. The hill wasn't huge, but it rose enough above the surrounding forest that you could see the tree lines stretch endlessly in every direction. During the day, it would have been a great view. At night, it was just a black ocean of branches and shadow. We set up a small camp, nothing fancy, a couple of packs dropped near a cluster of rocks, a fire pit dug into the dirt where others had clearly burned wood before. Someone had left old charred logs stacked off to the side, half-burnt remnants of previous nights. It felt familiar, used, safe. We got the fire going just as the last light drained from the sky. Flames licked upward, crackling, throwing warm orange light across our faces and pushing back the darkness just enough to make the small circle around us feel protected. Outside that circle, it was just black. The kind of black that swallows everything. No streetlights, no houses, no distant glow of civilization. Just trees and whatever might be moving between them. We didn't think about that. Not then. We were too busy talking, joking, passing time the way you do when you're young, and convinced that nothing bad ever really happens to you. Someone had brought a compound bow, more as a novelty than anything else. We took turns shooting at a makeshift target we'd set up earlier, laughing when arrows missed or stuck awkwardly into the ground. There was a hatchet too, used for splitting small pieces of wood. And I had a knife on my belt. Normal things. Camping things. Tools that, at the time, didn't mean anything beyond what they were. The night settled in around us. The fire burned steady. Time passed without us noticing. By the time it happened, it had to be around midnight. The kind of hour where conversations slow down a little, where the energy dips, where the quiet of the woods starts to press in, just enough that you become aware of it without fully acknowledging it. We were sitting in a loose circle around the fire. I remember exactly where everyone was. Ryan to my left, leaning back slightly, poking at the fire with a stick. Mark across from me, the firelight catching the side of his face, leaving the rest in shadow. Ethan off to the right, messing with something in his pack. I was halfway through saying something, I don't even remember what, when Mark suddenly stopped moving. Just froze. His eyes shifted past me. into the darkness behind me. And then he said it. "Who are you?" The words cut through everything. Sharp, immediate, wrong. I turned around, and that's when I saw him. At first, he didn't look real. He stood just at the edge of the trees where the firelight barely reached. Half of him was illuminated in a dim, flickering orange glow, the rest swallowed by shadow. It made his shape feel incomplete, like he was both there and not. He was tall, at least 6 feet, maybe more. His shoulders were broad, his posture rigid, unmoving. And in his hand, he held a rock. Not a small one. Not something you'd casually carry. A large, jagged stone, heavy enough that it would do serious damage if thrown or swung. He wasn't hiding it. He wasn't lowering it. He was just holding it and staring at us. No expression, no movement, just watching. For a second, no one said anything. The fire crackled. A log shifted, sending a burst of sparks upward into the night. The sound felt too loud, too out of place. "Hey," Ryan said finally, his voice cautious but firm. "What are you doing?" No response. The man didn't move, didn't blink, didn't react. He just stood there and stared. Something about the silence made everything worse. If he had said something, anything, it might have broken the tension, made him human, made the situation make sense. But he didn't. And that's when the fear started to settle in. Not all at once. Slowly. Like something creeping up your spine. Ethan stood up first, stepping closer to the fire. "Do you know him?" he asked, glancing at Ryan. Ryan shook his head, his eyes never leaving the man. "No." Mark shifted slightly, reaching down without looking. That's when I heard it. The faint click of the bowstring being pulled back. He had picked up the compound bow. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way that made a show of it. Just quietly, efficiently. An arrow was knocked. Ready. The man still didn't move. Didn't react. Didn't even look at the weapon. It was like he didn't care. Or worse, like he already knew. I felt my hand move almost on its own, reaching for the knife on my belt. The familiar weight of it in my grip grounded me just enough to keep my head clear. Ryan grabbed the hatchet. The four of us, suddenly, without planning it, had formed something like a line. A barrier between him and the fire. Between him and us. Still, he said nothing. The seconds stretched. Long, uncomfortable. Each one heavier than the last. "What do you want?" Ryan asked, louder this time. The man's head tilted slightly. Just a fraction. Like he was considering the question. But no words came. Only that stare. Unbroken. Unnatural. The firelight flickered again, and for a moment it caught his face just right. And I remember thinking, there was something off about it. Not deformed. Not obviously wrong. Just empty. Like whatever expression should have been there, wasn't. He took one step forward. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just a single, deliberate step. And that was enough. "Don't," Mark said, his voice tight, the bowstring creaking slightly as he pulled it back further. The arrow pointed straight at him now. The man stopped. The rock in his hand shifted slightly, tightened. And for a moment, just a moment, it felt like everything was about to break. Like he was going to charge, or throw it, or do something. Anything. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every muscle in my body was tense, waiting, ready. And then, he stepped back, slowly, carefully. His gaze never left us. Not for a second. He took another step, then another, retreating, not turning around, not running, just backing into the darkness, one step at a time. Until the firelight no longer touched him. until his outline blurred into the trees, until he was gone, completely, like he had never been there at all. For a few seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. We just stood there staring at the place where he had been, waiting, listening. The woods were silent, too silent. Did that just... Ethan started, then stopped. Yeah, Ryan said quietly. Mark slowly lowered the bow, but he didn't relax. None of us did. Where did he come from? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No one answered, because none of us knew. And that was the worst part. This wasn't some random place near a road. This wasn't a campground with other people nearby. This was a hill, deep in the woods, miles from anything. And yet, he had walked right up to us, without a sound, without us noticing. We didn't sleep that night, not even close. We built the fire higher, bigger, fed it constantly, making sure the flames stayed strong, pushing the darkness back as far as we could. But it never felt far enough. Every sound in the woods became something. A branch snapping, leaves shifting, the faintest movement in the distance. Each one made us turn, look, listen, waiting for him to come back. Because none of us believed he was just gone. Not really. He hadn't run, hadn't fled. He had retreated, like he was choosing to leave. For now. We took turns staying awake, though none of us really slept even when we tried. The image of him standing there silent, holding that rock, replayed over and over in my head. What was he doing out there? Why us? Why didn't he say anything? And the question that kept coming back again and again, how long had he been watching before we noticed? The fire burned until morning. The sky slowly lightened, the black turning to gray, then pale blue. The woods came back into view. Normal, harmless, just trees. No sign of him. No footprints we could clearly follow. Nothing to prove what had happened except the four of us and the memory we all shared. We packed up quickly. No one suggested staying longer. No one joked. No one tried to brush it off. We left that hill the same way we came, but everything felt different. Because now we knew something. Out there, in those woods, we hadn't been alone. And whatever had stood at the edge of the firelight that night was still out there, somewhere, watching.